So, architects. So how can people maximize from what's happening right now with the new laws? There's a lot of people who have land out there, have commercial properties out there. There's also a rumor that commercials are dying, the high street is dying, retail is
Well,
collapsing.
Absolutely, and I think that's we touched upon the homeowner. If you have a commercial property in the high street, the current kind of system of classifying different types of kind of high street businesses is being completely overhauled.
Okay.
So many of our kind of viewers probably have heard of the term Class A1 retail, Class A3 restaurant or a cafe. So that's all being kind of swiped away. And the thinking behind it is to give flexibility because, some of these changes were already on the cards, but certainly because of the pandemic and the large-scale impact that it's had on many kind of high street users, the government wants to give as much flexibility as possible. So if somebody
is there not a danger of high streets just becoming apartment blocks?
I think so. I think with flexibility, there's sometimes does come with it certain byproducts which probably aren't desired. But by and large, if you have a retail property and it's now in an area where perhaps there's a surplus of retail property, as a property owner, you probably would welcome a bit of flexibility.
I mean, prior to COVID, the high street was fizzling away anyway. The whole retail and shops were vanishing. Big retailers were going online. The rents obviously too much. The non-domestic rates were too much, and the high street was in trouble before COVID. COVID has probably forced everyone to make that change a lot quicker than what they anticipated. But high streets like, Kingsheath High Street is suddenly becoming residential.
Yes.
I think that's one of the issues I think you're going to get anyway. With the aspect of the internet and being able to buy online, that took away the high street itself.
Yeah.
But I think secondly what's going to occur naturally, if you look at places like Digbeth, Guns Quarter, all the areas around there, you're going to get an increase of residential. There's a shortage of 300,000 properties in Birmingham. So the aspect of residential is a must, there's no doubt with that. The production is about 25,000 a year, so there's always a shortfall, which incurs the property value to go up. We just did a development for a client in Hodgill. You're familiar with 33 houses that we've done. And what we're finding that the property value has gone up. We had a valuation done on one of the properties prior to COVID. The same valuation guy came out after COVID, and I raised the question, how did you value the property? And he goes, there's been a downfall of 4% of value within Birmingham, but 14% across the board throughout the UK. So I feel Birmingham has got an advantage with the HS2. You've got the biggest high street bank coming over. You've got HM and Customs that have moved across. We're finding that a lot of London investors and homeowners are moving to the Midlands because it's easier for property value. You're getting more value for your money. You're actually getting an easy way of transport to work and to and fro.
Yes.
So HS2 has created a big boost to the economy. There's no doubt with that. So going back to the aspect of high street, I think a lot of it's going to change into residential, and with this aspect on the ground floor being able to go through from retail to restaurant, I think it'll become more European in its way. You'll find a lot of coffee shops, you'll find a lot of restaurants that will open up, especially in the city centre areas. Where I don't want to have a negative effect is the predominantly Ladypool roads, the Stratford roads, the Alnwick roads, those kind of areas where there's a lot of influx of food market already. And I think it's going to spoil the market in certain aspects because a lot of people are going to try and open up a food game. They're not employing the correct professionals. They're not looking at, not just in terms of the planning, building regulations or internal fit out, interior design, but the aspect of...
The game's been raised now, hasn't it?
Yeah, it has been raised. I mean, you look at some of the projects that have been done, some of the restaurants that have opened, they've gone up a notch.
Yes.
So I think some of the individual people who have not taken on a franchise or trying to open up something singular will find it difficult. But whereas the ones who are taking on a branding or creating a brand,
yes,
I think they'll succeed.
Just to add to that, really, they say with every negative comes a positive, and vice versa. And as you were saying, yes, there's a shortage of houses, and the high street, the city centres were in trouble, as we know previously anyway. So although on one hand, yes, it's created the opportunity now for more housing to help those that are obviously struggling, and the homeless rate is risen by God knows how much. But I think the only thing that we're in danger of is on the smaller high streets. They represent communities. They have that sort of, it's what we're about, and again, why were we named the second city? Our city centres, our high streets, that's what sort of forms that recognition. And with that gone, it's a case of, well,
interesting.
What's left?
Interesting.
I think the local communities will keep hold. I feel there'll be a stronghold. Because your day-to-day use is there. You've got pockets of residential that go to a local high street, things like Kings Heath and Alum Rock, Saltley, or Sparkhill, Sparkbrook. You've got those communities that are quite strong.
I mean, if you look at the high street, you've got Kings Heath High Street, you've got Eccles Green High Street, you've got Erdington High Street. Sillock High Street has now vanished with the retail park. But these high streets were where the hustle and bustle was, and where and now there's so many to-let boards up. And conversions into residentials. We were here before COVID, and this is the way things were going. But it's just with COVID happening, it's just been fast forwarded and forced upon people.
I think there needs to be a certain amount of contraction. Okay, I don't think we can argue that the high street needs to disappear. I think the trends that we've talked about, people going on, there needs to be a certain amount of contraction, and probably on many of these high streets, on the fringes, you probably would see residential coming in, and the high street kind of consolidating into a smaller area. Perhaps if that's done in an unregulated way and you get residential properties popping up in the middle, it probably does destroy the place a little bit. You don't have that kind of unified kind of place where you actually go to and you can move from one shop to the next or from one property to the next. But it's interesting, actually. As I say, there are kind of checks and balances in place. If you've got a retail shop and it's more than a kilometre away from any other similar facility, then unfortunately none of these rules apply. There will be protections in place for that. To go to residential, again, you will still have to apply to the local council, and they will have certain things that they can actually take into account. And in certain circumstances, you may not be allowed to do that. But yes, on the flip side of things, certainly food businesses won't need to go through any of that kind of process. And I think the market will determine, the better quality operators will thrive, as Gulrez has mentioned, and perhaps those businesses that have operated in the same way they were doing 20 years ago will find it much more difficult. So